My name is Mike Penn. I'm president of the Orange County Interfaith Network, and I'm so happy that you've taken the time out of a very, very busy schedule to be with us this evening. I'm looking forward to the evening, and I'm sure you're going to find it very informative. And I want to first of all thank the Church of the Foothills for hosting us tonight. And with that, I'd like to introduce their senior pastor here at Church of the Foothills, a longtime friend of mine and who has in his own right been very active in interfaith work in Orange County, Pastor Dr. Mike Holland.
Well, welcome everybody. Glad to have you here. It's special for us to host interfaith events. 20 years ago, the Interfaith Council of Central Orange County had its first meeting here at the Church of the Foothills, thanks to Bill Shane. Where are you, Bill? He's out working the registration. And Bill did a great job helping us get started and is still meeting here quite often. So we welcome you. Whenever I go somewhere, the first two things I want to know: where's the drinking fountain and the restrooms? And in this case, they're both in the same place. We don't have a drinking fountain in this building, but the restrooms are along the wall. Any door on that side of the building will get to the restrooms. In there if you need to get some water or something. So this is a very special night. Mike asked me just to begin with an opening word, and I thought I would bring you my Easter sermon, but then you can hear it on the website. Is that okay? So we gathered here. Let me just call us into this very important special time. The sacred is already here, and the Spirit of the divine is speaking. So let us listen with humility and courage. We will respect each other on our many paths of this faith journey. Let each of us do what we can to make our communities a safer place. Let us seek peace and healing and truth and community. Let us act always out of love and faith and never out of fear. And let us rely on the power of the sacred to do our work together. And now I offer this prayer in our opening. Gracious One, whom we know by many names and in many ways, we join the spectrum of your children from different faiths who are praying for our nation. We realize that we're asking for changes in our world. We pray for those who exercise power over the lives of people. May they be willing to pursue peace, justice, and the well-being for all, and share the prosperity of our land with others. We pray for all who are in media and thus influence public opinion. Shape their priorities in ways that keep them from promoting divisiveness. Invite them instead to use their talents to enlighten all to greater truth. We pray for us, the citizens of this country we call home, and for those who seek to make this land their home. May we not be naive or indifferent, but join together in the work of alleviating bias, bullying, intolerance, and injustice. Challenge us whenever we act as if freedom and peace and opportunity of this country were meant for our benefit alone. Remind us to be changed people, to change our attitudes as well as our actions, that together we may establish a beloved community that we all desire. Bless this gathering with unity and the wisdom we need. So be it.
Thank you. As I mentioned, I'm the president of the Orange County Interfaith Network, and at the reception table out front, you received a program. I hope if not, we can have those for you. But inside, also there was a brochure that talks about a little information about who OCIM is and what we do, representing, and within that, the 13 individual interfaith councils that exist. Also in your packet, you received an information card that is for letting us know who you are, and if you care to get more involved or find out more about an interfaith organization near you, please fill this out and leave it with the registration table just outside. I would like to have this opportunity to mention that we do have some of our members here with us, and so if anybody that's on our board of directors that's present this evening, if you could raise your hand. There they are. There's some of our board members. Please, if you have any questions, seek them out, and they'll be glad to talk to you about what it is that we do and where an organization near your home might exist for you to be able to get more involved in the interfaith community. You'll find that work in interfaith is not religious work. It's education. And that's part of our motto, is that we support, we educate, and we try to empower. And that's what we're doing here this evening. And to help us do that, I want to thank some of our sponsors this evening. I want to thank the Orange County Community Foundation, the Pacifica Institute, which is also taking some photographs for us tonight, which we thank them for. We want to thank the Shen Wen Foundation. Also, we want to share a thanks out to the Sheriff Council of Southern California and a country called Syria. We want to thank them for providing funds for us to allow this to happen. To invite you here to help inform our neighbors and ourselves about what's happening here in Orange County. That said, I'd like to begin the meeting by introducing to you our Master of Ceremonies and our moderator, Dot Leach. Dot is currently the president of the Interfaith. She's one of the 13. President of the Interfaith Council of Greater Santa Margarita. She has a long history of interfaith activity, and having served on the board of Texas-Louisiana Lutheran Synod and on its committee for ecumenical affairs. Now, as an Episcopal Church in Rancho Santa Margarita, she serves as the chair of the Parish Council's Interfaith Committee. Dot is a trained broadcast journalist and enjoyed a long career in radio and television news. Today, she is the owner of Rock Press 7 Video Productions, a company that focuses primarily on producing civic documentaries. And Dot is also a very, very proud graduate of the University of Texas in Austin. Look on horns. Dot, please.
Good evening. My thanks to Mike for that lovely introduction, especially that last part. My thanks also to the Orange County Interfaith Network for inviting me to moderate this wonderful and worthwhile series. The more you know, the less you hear. And thanks to all of you for joining us tonight as we spend the next couple of hours focusing on Orange County's struggles with diversity. You know, as I prepared for this evening, I realized that the title has us acknowledging that there are conflicts, there are problems that we share with one another about the differences in our communities, the diversities in our communities, whether they be ethnic, cultural, religious, gender ID, or even economic status. Anything that is different from who we are or what we are in the sense of our professions or our education makes it sometimes something that we don't understand and we need to explore. And to realize that it's right in our backyards. For being here tonight, as we give this some time and thought, we have gathered a panel of extraordinary experts. All gentlemen tonight, and before anyone says, if this is about diversity, where is a woman? The truth is, we're invited to be on the panel and neither could make it. One of them will be on our third and final panel. So please do not think that that was something that was ignored. It was not. So let me continue with our introductions now. Beginning at the far end of the table is Father Edward Petty. He is the pastor of Immaculate Heart of Mary Catholic Church right here in Santa Ana. Father Ed was born and raised in this area and ordained a priest for the Diocese of Orange in 1980. He has served several parishes in the area, and his ministry has always focused on immigrants, racial and ethnic minorities, and the economically disadvantaged populations of Orange County. He has served on numerous interfaith councils and as a board member of the OC Human Relations Commission. Next is Dr. Gurpreet Pooja. He is a pediatric ear, nose, throat, head, and neck surgeon at Children's Hospital of Orange County. And he is also a clinical professor of otolaryngology. I'm going to say it one more time, yes. Otolaryngology. Did I get it, doctor? Thank you. I've been practicing for 5 days. He serves in that department at UC Irvine. In his spare time, he is also president of the California Sex Council, and he and his lovely wife, who is also a pediatrician, are both active as volunteers and community leaders in our area. Usame Lush is the executive director of the Los Angeles chapter of CARE, which is the Council on American Islamic Relations. Mr. Elush is a frequent lecturer on Islam and on topics such as civil rights, hate crimes, and international affairs pertaining to American Muslims. He is also often sought out by local, national, and international media as a highly respected voice for articulating the mainstream Muslim position on various issues. In addition, he is a graduate of the University of Texas. So he is a very, very smart man. So book of Martin. Brian Levitt is a professor of criminal justice and director of the Nonpartisan Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at California State University, San Bernardino. There he specializes in the analysis of hate crimes, domestic and international terrorism, and related legal issues. He earned his law degree at Stanford. Professor Levin has testified before Congress and different state legislatures, as well as having been cited in numerous legal and social science journals dealing with extremism and hate crimes. It looks familiar to some of you, as he has been seen on both 60 Minutes and MSNBC's Rachel Maddow show as a guest expert. I also heard him say just a few minutes ago he had been with Bill O'Reilly recently. I say nothing. And finally, Danny Cesena is a transition services coordinator for the LGBTQ Center of Orange County, and he is a member of the World Professional Association of Transgender Health. The goal of that entity being the education of the medical community on healthcare disparities faced by the transgender community. Danny works for different program development and advocacy programs affirming trans youth and adults in schools, businesses, and medical settings such as clinics, hospitals, and medical schools. Danny is also a frequent guest speaker on trans rights and the law. Before we open up the floor to all of you to ask your questions, there's just a few little things that I would like to set out as far as a guideline. First and foremost, please know all questions are welcomed, as long as they are posed with respectability and with civility. And the responses that will come back to you will follow those same guidelines. We have 2 microphones here that you will see. If you have a question, please just step up, and you may have to stand in line. What I want to say to you is, if you have a question that you want directed only at one of the panelists, that's fine, just let us know. If you'd like 2 or 3 to answer, or the entire panel, if you're looking for a response from all of them, just please tell us that so that they'll know when to answer you. So to begin, I will also say, let me add this very quickly. just so that we cover enough topics tonight and so that each of our speakers have an opportunity to share their expertise. There may be a time or two that I may inject an extra question as well. So I will start us off this evening by posing the first question to all our panelists, and we'll begin with Father Ed to answer once the question is asked. We often hear the word fear, and Pastor Holland in his prayer so beautifully said, please let us not be fearful. And yet that is a word that we hear quite a bit these days, especially when it is connected with differences and diversities, whether they be ethnic, religious, or cultural. We hear people say they fear Muslims, they fear blacks, they fear transgenders in restrooms. My question to each of you is, in your experiences, what exactly are people most threatened by when it comes to diversity, and what do you believe they really fear?
Addressing my reality in Santa Ana, the fear of the people that I work with begins with the anxiety of children for their parents because of the immigration law and enforcement and speaking of that immigration law. There have been some large gatherings of Know Your Right forums, specifically because people's fear of what might happen to them. And even at places like Catholic Charities, citizenship is up, increased because of permanent residents, a certain anxiety about their status and what might happen to them. Given the possibilities that we had of passing immigration law, which would have dispelled a lot of fear from many different sides, the reality is that the failure of Congress to pass significant immigration law has sent people, communities, states, and individuals to enforce the law by themselves, and has not dispelled the fear that they had. And so one of the things would be taking a broken system that's now given energy to unhelpful reactions is part of the reality that I live in Santa Ana. Just the mentions of deportations have bred more fear and less reporting to police and authorities in areas of harassment, verbal abuse, wage theft, or domestic violence.
So, if I may, can I phrase it as what people might fear from looking at somebody who I represent as a person with a turban and a beard versus what my community is fearful of or apprehensive about. To do the society with So I'm going to respond in two ways. One, when somebody looks at somebody like me, what are they fearful of, or what I suspect they're fearful of? What my community is fearful of while living in the United States. So let me address the first part. I think fundamentally, we as humans tend to be very tribal. And we are always suspicious of something or somebody who looks different from who we perceive as the model of normalcy. And that, to a Sikh living in India, seeing somebody of the Hasidic Jewish background will be entirely different and unusual. And I've had that same response when I was in New York by the Hasidic Jewish community, looking at somebody like me with a turban. And this is pre-9/11. Following 9/11, things changed considerably, where the turban and the beard came to represent a fringe element of a very, very minuscule element of a much larger world community, which had terrorist intentions, but because of their appearance came to represent the entire community. Unfortunately, in the United States, 99% of the people wearing turbans are Sikhs, not Taliban or Al-Qaeda. And so, as a result of the great tragedy that was meted upon us in 2001, on all of us as United States citizens, the fear that it created led to a backlash against the Sikhs. And the first person who died in this country following 9/11 tragedy was a Sikh gentleman in Mesa, Arizona. Between 2002 and 2012, over 140 hate crimes have been recorded against the Sikhs in the United States. And when you look at the FBI numbers, the total statistics, that's a very disproportionate incidence of hate crimes against a community that only is 500,000 strong in this country. So it represents a very small population of the United States. And in a survey that was carried out in 2008 and subsequently in 2010, in the Bay Area, 10% of Sikhs reported being either physically assaulted or having their homes vandalized. 2/3 of them were physical assaults or nasty counts. The majority of the physical assaults that are very serious. They may not have been lethal assaults. And the third were vandalisms against their property. Similar numbers on the East Coast as well in Boston and New York. So we came to represent a fringe element that we really were not a part of, nor was the overwhelming majority of the Muslim community, for instance. And that's the fear born out of a terrible tragedy being meted out against all of us Americans. And that is perhaps blended the two questions together. We're not articulated right now. But fundamentally, it becomes fear of not knowing who the other person is. And it's the fear of ignorance, born out of ignorance. And that's a challenge that we continue to face. Take, for instance, the fact that there are 3.1 million people in Orange County. And we are here having this conversation, and there are perhaps 60 of us in this room. And I'm delighted that the people who are here because you're willing to engage in this conversation. But the overwhelming majority of us are still unwilling, despite the change in the demographics of our county, unwilling to engage in the conversation. So the big fear I have is that of ignorance of place. Sorry, I give you one answer to that.
I think we're all going to be using the same microphone. I think fear is an emotional sentiment that people develop when they're afraid about their safety, when they're worried about their safety, or they're worried about the unknown, what could happen. Some fear is justified. Being fearful of having a car accident when you see somebody driving fast next to you. If you live in Syria, you're fearful of a barrel bomb hitting you, maybe. We're all afraid of terrorists. Afraid of, if you're an undocumented immigrant today, you're afraid of an ICE raid. So some fear is legitimate in the sense that it could happen and action should be taken to address and alleviate this fear. Different things you can take. The fear we're worried about is the irrational fear, phobia, sometimes. Islamophobia, homophobia, whatever it is that come as a result of a certain perception a person has about a group that is usually quite often based on ignorance, not knowing much about that group, because ignorance leads to fear. People fear what they don't know. Whatever that thing is, person, group of people. And that is a serious problem, because people who are afraid tend to do things that are irrational, that people who are not afraid wouldn't even think they would justify. No one will ever justify targeting a person because they're wearing a turban. Because that would be a threat. Or people at a temple, or a Jewish school, or a mosque. But if they're afraid, in the back of their mind, suddenly the wrong becomes right or acceptable. The unjustified will become justified, because at that point, you're justifying it as an action to protect your country, or stand up for your rights. The third type of fear, and that is something that is an issue that needs to be addressed, and we should never allow for the target community to deal with that fear. We can't expect the Muslim community or the Jewish community when it's being targeted, or the Latino, or the documented, undocumented, the refugees, the Sikh community. We can't wait for them to say, hey, we're being targeted, because someone is afraid of us. We can't say we're not doing enough outreach. Hey, you need to educate the public. Because the fact that someone doesn't know about me still does not justify them fearing me or targeting me and my family, while I still have maybe a need to explain who I am. But in reality, I don't make that a requirement, a prerequisite to end the fear. That's not my job to educate 300 million Americans about what Islam is. It's my pleasure to do so, and I try to do so. But that should not be made as, well, do more so people can stop hating me. Well, no, maybe they should stop hating me, and then we can all get to know about each other. The third part of the fear that needs to be addressed is the manufactured fear. See, what we talked about was ignorance. It's more like a passive fear that develops out of, because I don't know about that community, I'm afraid what they're going to do to me because maybe I watched the movie. The manufactured fear is the worst type of fear, because there's an industry today that benefits, that exploits fear. Either the pseudo-experts that we watch on TV every once in a while telling us, the sky is falling, watch out, on certain news that we will not name because its name is Fox News. Or actually there are industries. There are industries that benefit from the result of fear. Usually fear leads to war, incarceration. So there's a whole industry that benefits from building prisons. There's a whole industry that benefits from building airport scanners, body scanners, to keep us safe. There's a whole industry that benefits from selling weapons and using them. So there is an industry that benefits from writing books that talks about how Muslims are a threat to our constitution, to our country. Actually, the Center for American Progress, the Southern Poverty Law Center, CARE, have done studies, and they found actually there are about 70 organizations in America that operate mostly on a full-time or semi-pseudo, or maybe semi-full-time, to promote fear and misinformation of Islam, with a budget of about $50 million a year. Producing books, producing material, fake news, commentators. And the goal of it is to make you fear or fearful of your Muslim neighbor, of the Muslim candidates, of the Muslim mayor, or the person trying to be a mayor. I mean, the end goal is to marginalize that society and then, obviously, for them to benefit. So these are the three areas that I think are important. There is legitimate fear that should be addressed. Rational people can agree that that is legitimate, and no one should be allowed to be fearful. Whether it's children or parents, we should address that fear. There is the fear based on ignorance, and it's our collective responsibility possibility to address that ignorance or misinformation, manufactured fear that actually is an industry, and people behind it should be exposed because they are causing harm. At the end of the day, the result of fear is not just attitudes, but actions. Because those attitudes lead to hate crimes, hate incidents, bullying, job discriminations, bad policies, domestic and foreign. So there are real results and repercussions to fear.
Thank you very much for having me tonight. There are some interesting trends going on, and one of the things that our center, Cal State does, the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism does, we're a little different. We're research and policy oriented. We don't have a particular constituency that we represent per se. That turned out to be a blessing. There are certain things going on that are bigger than hate crime and hate incidents. Might very well be as much of a symptom of a manifestation that is more broad. And this is what I'm referring to. If you go to Europe and you ask people who are in the area of resolving intergroup conflict, they use the term civic or civil cohesion. And we have had a fragmentation and splintering here in the United States that is taking place throughout many parts of the world, in particular, Europe and North America. And what is that? Of which hate crimes and hate incidents are part of that composite, part of that amalgam. There is a thrust towards Euro-nationalism. In the United States, we are held together by a civic creed and the institutions which bound our pluralistic democracy. The year I was born, let's say a little more than 50. 77% of Americans trusted the federal government. Today, it's under 19%. If you look at the institutions and processes that held us together as a community, whether it's medicine, whether it's the economy, the Supreme Court, Congress, local government, trust in these institutions, by the way, academia as well. And the good doctor was referring to tribalism. That is rearing its ugly head. But America is different. We become residents and citizens of this country based on a creed of egalitarian pluralism. That is under assault. And we are seeing it borne out in various ways. This anti-globalization, anti-elitist. Indeed, facts no longer matter. On Bill O'Reilly's show, I've been on his show on various times over the years. Back in November, when we were seeing a spate of hate crimes and hate incidents, there's millions of viewers that wasn't happening. Data is very important because we formulate public policy from that. We were seeing an explosion of hate incidents and hate crimes across the United States. We just put together a study which confirmed that. Not necessarily in every jurisdiction, for instance, some places in the Midwest, not so much. Los Angeles, we saw a significant increase in hate crimes in the fourth quarter of 2016 versus the fourth quarter of 2015, around election time. New York, same thing. Washington, same thing. A variety of cities. So what I am saying to you is that this manifestation of hate crime is related to an attack on the pluralistic philosophy, processes, and institutions of our pluralistic democracy. anti-globalization, stopping immigration, Muslim bans, which I was very fortunate to have a wonderful co-author, Hussein Ibish, the Daily Beast, where we wrote a piece on that. This fortress America. Watch the French elections. See what happens in places like the Netherlands. We do know something, though. When the New York Times called me and asked me a question about how does politics play a role, well, our data is not as diagnostic and as predictive as we'd like. What I can tell you so far nationally, from the jurisdictions we looked at, there have been many that are at multi-year highs. Not all of them have increased, but the majority have gone up. Moreover, there is an industry that does sell fear of change. And one of the things I think is interesting to look at statistics on how people are feeling. College students are the most depressed they've been in 50 years. We have over 52,000 people dying of opiate addiction in the United States. So we have people who are primed for being disenfranchised and angry. And they are customers, or would-be customers, for those who are selling hatred. Indeed, Mr. O'Reilly said that he was relayed to confirm all this, said it wasn't happening, that the factor could not confirm this. And he said, we have to look at solved crimes. I said, well, we never did that in criminal data collection before. We look at reports of crimes, and then we get the people later. And it was only a couple, 3 days after the election. Bottom line is, be careful, because when conspiracy theories and the notion of religious pluralism being overrun by these fearful stereotypes, it is a problem. And what I would say to you is, the big issue may not be the stuff that I directly study, but maybe the stuff we indirectly study. So for instance, in September, we told the New York Times that we expected 260 anti-Muslim hate crimes and a 68% increase. When the FBI came out with their data, it was 257 and 67% increase. But almost more important, and potentially more important, is that there's been a normalization of bigotry. Over 40% of Americans today admit, if you look at the Pew surveys, if you look at Gallup, this has been going on for some time, prejudice against Muslims, for instance. And what's so interesting is that prejudice is based on fear, and there indeed is an industry. Indeed, when somebody said that my data from an entity that was designated as a hate group, they said that people who put this data out make it up, and they said specifically about our center, which is located in San Bernardino of all places, that we did so with a terrorist supporting agenda. Even though our data came from every major police agency that we could get in the United States. So what I'm telling you is be careful, because truth is now a sacred currency of which conspiracy theories are the counterfeit currency. I'm going to close with this. People respond to community, and people respond to leadership. The New York Times reporter, and by the way, some of these articles said that I was in a conspiracy with CARE and the New York Times. I did not know that, because I didn't contact any outside entities other than police agencies. One of the things that we found when he said, how does political discourse influence manifestations of hate crime? We went back and we scoured cases that we looked at throughout the United States. We found that there was an elevated number of hate crimes after terrorist attacks. But listen to this. 6 days after 9/11, President Bush spoke at the Islamic Center of Washington, D.C. And he said, Islam is a peace. Hate crimes dropped 66% over the next 6 days. and 67% the following year. On December 2nd, our community was hit by a terrorist attack in San Bernardino. There were 8 hate crimes nationally, anti-Muslim hate crimes that we could find. The previous monthly average was 12.6. So on December 7th, then candidate Trump gave a speech in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and tweeted his first incarnation of his Muslim ban. We had an 87.5% increase in anti-Muslim hate crimes in the next 5 days. Words matter, leadership matters, and more importantly, community matters. After the terrorist attack that hit our community, we had interfaith vigils, we had a variety of interfaith and community forums. There was not a single hate crime in the city of San Bernardino following the terrorist attack that struck our community. The nation could not say the same. So fear is something that is understandable. We shouldn't attack people who are fearful. We should engage them. The problem is, in the era that we're in now, the rhetoric is so overheated that these stereotypes, which are throughout the ether, influence those who are on the margins to take their hatred further. And I think we're seeing 2 distinct things that I'm going to close on. One is the actual instance of hate crimes, but the other thing is something as egregious, and that is an effort to marginalize and prevent residents and citizens from being meaningful participants in a pluralistic civic democracy. Be careful of that. And that you're going to see represented more in numbers about hate incidents than you will with respect to hate crime, where people may be less willing to put themselves at risk for prosecution. But they might be willing to do a variety of other things that don't rise to the level of crime to prevent people from being comfortable in the United States. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here. Why are people afraid? Especially, why are people afraid of my community? Why are people afraid of the transgender community? And I think it goes back to what everyone here has said. It's fear of the unknown. It's something that people don't understand. We're raised with a gender binary, male and female. You know, when a child is born, it has male genitalia, you're designated male. If it has female genitalia, you're designated female. But when someone comes out as transgender and you don't understand that someone identifies as something different than their assigned sex at birth, right? Well, this isn't normal. This isn't how you were raised. This isn't okay. You know, then let's bring the bathroom issues into it. You know, well, why does a man want to use a woman's restroom? Why does a woman want to use the man's restroom? That's not what it's about. It's about a person just needing to use the restroom. And with people trying to pass laws saying, you cannot use a restroom if you have this genitalia. You cannot be in this public place. If you're identified as something outside of our own narrow views, then that's basically telling us it's not okay for us to exist. We don't deserve to exist. We don't deserve to be seen. You know, after the new administration took over the White House, that very first day, they took down LGBT protections from their website. That's the administration telling me my life does not matter. That I do not have a right to exist. I do not have a right to be a living, breathing human being because I do not fit your norms. You know, a perfect example is everyone here has a gender identity. Everyone here, when you got ready today to come to this forum, hardly anyone probably really thought about what you were going to wear, how you're going to present. some earrings, a little bit of perfume, a cute blouse, maybe you wore a tie, might wear a nice sports coat, and you think nothing of it. You walk out the door, you come here, no second thought. For me, when I get ready every day, I stand in front of the mirror and I ask myself, do I look masculine enough? Will people view me as a man? Will people respect who I am? And every time I talk in a forum like this, whether it's at a church or guest lecturing on gender identity or doing an employment training, I'm constantly re-outing myself and telling people I am transgender. And that puts my life at risk because I don't know how someone's gonna react. The truth is that we are more fearful of the general public than you are of us. Every time I walk into a restroom, I walk in with my head down and off to the side, hoping no one will take a good look at me and see that I still have feminine features and question, why are you using the men's restroom? Why are you in here? What is your motive? I can't be. That's it. You know, but unfortunately, I don't have that confidence, and so many members of the community don't have that confidence to walk in and out of the restroom with their head held up high and go use the facilities, wash their hands, reapply lipstick, fix the hair, comb my goatee again, and walk back out. We rush in, wash our hands, and rush back out. Every time I walk out the door, my wife wonders, is my husband gonna come home alive today? Knowing that I'm re-outing myself, knowing that I'm advocating for my community, knowing that someone who does not understand gender identity, who does not understand the transgender community, can be so fearful in their minds that they'll take it out on me and that their life matters more than mine, they could potentially kill me. Now, unfortunately, here in Orange County, we have a very high rate of transgender hate incidences. And I want to take a moment to thank the OCHR for collecting that data and for saying our lives matter. And we want to do everything possible to make sure you are safe and that policies are in place to make sure that you know you matter, that you deserve to work here, to live here, and go to school here. So thank you very much. So that's what it is. It's fear of the unknown, not understanding that we are just like you. We're just like everybody else. We go to school, we work, we pay taxes. But we have so much more fear underneath us than everyone else has against us. Allow us to live with you. Allow us to survive with you. Allow us to exist beside you. Because so many of us are college graduates. So many of us have worked in the industries right beside you and you never would have known it. Everyone in here has used the restroom of a transgender person and probably never knew it. If you don't know something, if you're wondering, well, what is the LGBT community? What is this gender identity thing you're talking about? What is non-binary? What is asexual? Learn about it, research it. And if you have questions, contact the center, contact the OCHR, contact anybody here, because we would love to answer those questions and to show you that we have the same feelings, we have the same fears, and we have the same goals just as you do. Thank you.
The time has come to open the floor to all of you to ask questions, and I have to believe after hearing all 5 of these outstanding gentlemen that you have questions. There are microphones right here if you will come forward to ask your questions. And
now, why don't you let us pass the mics?
okay, we can do that.
A little
We
faster.
can pass the mics and that may move a little faster.
Anyone?
Hello everyone. Certainly, knowledge is power and ignorance is our worst enemy. My question is directed to the Sikh doctor. I really feel so sympathy with your community. I am a Muslim woman from Orange County, Mission Viejo Mosque, and I have been following up with the news, and I realized how hard it has been for your community. My question is how the children, young children, and the teenagers in your community are dealing with this fear, how that is affecting their self-esteem, how they are dealing, going to school and knowing any minute somebody could come to them and confront them or irritate them physically, psychologically, or could hurt them, could kill them. So I'm wondering, would you please address that? Thank you so much.
Certainly. The data on bullying is extraordinarily, that's a very good question. Thanks for the opportunity. And thanks for your kind words. The data on bullying for the Sikh community is particularly disturbing. 13 in California alone, where they did a survey in Fresno, 13% of the Sikh kids face bullying daily, are confronted with bullying daily. 21% get harassed at least once a week, and about 67%, 2/3 of the kids have faced bullying in some form or another on a regular basis. That's twice the national average. And the numbers are even more astounding if you go to Seattle, Washington, a survey from Indianapolis, where there's a smaller presence of Sikhs. Fresno has a large population of Sikhs. California has the largest population of Sikhs in the United States. That challenge is not new to the Sikh faith, because we are a minority even in our country of origin, in India. Rajat Sikhs have been here for over 100 years. And part of the reason is that we will remain minorities because Sikh faith does not believe in proselytizing. We believe that whatever faith you follow to the best of your ability, that all faiths are paths, different paths to God. And we respect all faiths. So a Sikh would never go out and say, well, my faith is a better path. Why don't you become a Sikh? And the reason I say that is, the Sikh kids are taught to embrace all the cultures of people. And we still continue to emphasize that, even despite the harassment. And that still remains the point of focus of instruction from the parents to their children. That's what gives them strength, we feel. And that's why, despite the majority of the hate crimes against Sikhs occurring because they are perceived to be of the Islamic faith, perceived to be Muslim, as a community, the Sikhs decided right at the outset, right after 9/11, that we are not going to go out and say, hey, we are not Muslims, so you go and else to attack. Because as Americans, we want everybody to be safe. And we fully recognize that the tragedies that have occurred over the years in different parts of the world, different populations of people, and criminal things, it's not restricted to any one group of people. And whenever they do, it's a small fringe element of that community that does those things. The vast majority of us just want to live peacefully. So how do we confront that, or how do we teach our children to confront that? Mostly through education. We do the best we can to empower our kids to become integral members of society, to be involved in their sports teams, to be good debaters, to do academically well, to be engaged with people of other communities, invite them to their homes, go to their people's homes, and become a part of the fabric of which they are members of. Two integral parts of that fabric. We hope that through that process, in a generation, or perhaps it might take a little bit longer, we will create that level of understanding that may allow this harassment to diminish. I don't think we'll ever go away. That's the reality. It's a trying society. We will always find or create a real or imaginary other. And so bullying is true for any community. It may be disproportionately high against the Sikhs now, but that may be different in different parts of the world or in different states. So we cannot completely eliminate that, but by creating understanding and making our kids feel that they are a critical part of the society, we hope that they'll be able to combat it and still hold their heads high as American citizens and as proud Sikhs.
I grew up in the 40s and 50s in Kentucky and had every definable prejudice one can be given in the South. And exposure to different people over the years at the university and in business gave me an opportunity to meet and shed those prejudices one by one. What it spawned from is, for some reason, I wanted to lose those prejudices. And the last one was homophobia, that through working with people in a church in Northern California, I found that that was one of the stupidest things one could have, which was a real blessing when our daughter became a lesbian. So what I want to ask you guys is, what can we as ordinary citizens do to help people want to change their minds?
Who would like to feel that first? Annie, would you like to start?
I'll go first. Share your daughter's story if she's open. You know, we all in here, more or less, have someone in our family who identifies as LGBTQ. We probably even have friends who are Muslim or Sikh or who are Catholic or any other type of minority group that we don't know anything about. And the best way to share that, to break down that discrimination, to break down the walls, is to share the stories. Share my story, share your daughter's story, continue to share everyone's story up here, because that's the only way things are going to change. One of the biggest things I say is this: we need our allies. Not everyone is going to want to hear a story from a trans man. Not everyone is going to want to hear a story from a Muslim. But they might want to hear a story from you because you don't identify as trans, or you don't identify as a Sikh or a Muslim. But when you go and say, oh yeah, this is this great person, and blah, 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 and let me tell you their story, then people will be like, whoa, why are you sharing that? You know, you don't have nothing to do with that community. No, but I want to share how amazing they are. That's how we break down that negative stigma. That's how we end discrimination, is telling each other stories.
Gordon Alport wrote The Nature of Prejudice, which is the oldest and probably the premier treatise on studying that topic. And he found that meaningful interaction with people who are different changes people. Another thing that we found from studying hate offenders, my colleagues Jack McTed and Jack Levin, we can, on our website, you can listen to them, by the way, there's a whole video we put up. They're on our board. Talk about prejudice. So, by the way, you can find it at Hate Monitor. And you just put it in Google and put Bernardino, and it'll come up. Go to the expert video section. Dr. Robin Williams of Cornell talked about the printed circuit of stereotypes, which labels people as legitimate targets for aggression. What I think is so interesting is we now know about how this is manifested, in particular with regard to criminality, but I think it could extend out to other types of interactions. The most common type of hate offender is someone who has very shallow prejudices, but they adhere to it when a lever is pulled, and that lever is for thrill, excitement, and peer validation. So when a community sends a message that prejudice is not acceptable in the community. That will deter the most common type of hate offender. The next type is a reactive defensive offender. They're responding to either disrespect or some kind of threat. Someone moving into a neighborhood, a terrorist attack overseas. One of the things that our research showed, that when political leaders and community leaders stand up and help define where the discussion should go, it has a salutary effect on the manifestation of hate crimes. The least common type, but often the most violent, are the mission offenders. And what we have to do with them is to treat the conditions that make them disenfranchised from society and so angry. And if that doesn't work, lock them up. So those are some things that I think we can do. Also, I think we have to pay attention to what's going on. When our study came out last year, it was before the FBI started counting transgender crime. We found a 40% increase in the 9 jurisdictions throughout the country that actually counted that. This coming year, the Sikh community is going to be added. We also found, interestingly enough, the Arab community is going to be added in a breakdown now by the FBI. We did it first. We found that the hate crimes against people perceived to be Arab was an even bigger increase than those perceived to be Muslim. So what we have to do is, as a community, define what it is to be a pluralistic American and say that certain types of behaviors are unacceptable. Because what we're doing now is saying, well, transgendered people are weird and scary, or Muslims and Arabs are all this undifferentiated pool of potential terrorists. And indeed, they're not even a religion. It's a radical, violent ideology, which therefore means that they shouldn't be protected by the First Amendment. When we let other people take the reins of leadership and take it in a direction that undermines the creeds of a pluralistic democracy, that unraveling of civic cohesion will only continue. So that's what I think we have to do. We have to fight stereotypes when they come up. And it doesn't have to be the people who are the target of it. It could be those of us who are friends and neighbors of them. And also exert some leadership with respect to that. Thank you.
Testing. It's working. Maybe I'm not a very optimistic person. I don't know if we can change people or make them wanting to be learning about others. I think only God can do that. Again, reached over the years. But what we can do, we can create the conditions. We can create the conditions that makes it harder for people to be prejudiced, for people to feel comfortable being prejudiced about us. The way we can do it is, Dr. Waleed was talking about, during the last campaign, hate, bigotry became normalized in the country. So it became okay. You know, there has always been racism in this country. If anyone suddenly got surprised about the anti-black racism or anti-Muslim or anti-Semitism, I don't know where you've been living. I mean, there has always been racism in this country. Ask any people of color. You know, I'm very happy that my brothers and sisters from the white community are realizing this, and there was the Women's March and all of that. But you can talk to anyone who belongs to a certain minority, they will tell you it has been a normal thing. It just peaked now, or maybe became more normal. The reality is, and we can look at the history, I don't want to go into that, but you know, from the time, the way we treated Native Americans, the way we treated Catholics in this country, the way we treated Jews, Irish, Italians, Latinos, Blacks, Muslims, Mormons, and the list goes on and on. So we've had a long history that continues. What we can do is it peaks when it becomes normal to do so in areas, you know, where this is normalized, and then people take it to the next level. So what we can do is, again, make it abnormal, unacceptable to become like that. And as Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see, right, in this world. If we want to change the way people are, let's begin with ourselves. I'm not saying we are prejudiced. Sometimes we tolerate prejudiced people, people of prejudice around us. It could be within our own family, within our own maybe workplace, sometimes maybe within our church, mosque, temple. So if we can be that voice where we're sitting at a dinner table and someone makes a comment thinking it's a funny joke about a group of people, challenge it, in a nice way. Say, you know what, I don't think that's right. I've actually known Muslims that they're not like that. Oh, Sikh people don't believe in that. Oh, Jewish people are not like that. Maybe you had a bad experience with that person, and that person had an issue, but not because of his or her faith and such. So if we start by challenging, then it becomes harder for people to express their hatred only. Number two, I think learn. We have access to knowledge now. No one can have an excuse and say, I don't know what a Muslim is. I don't know what Google. That's very simple. Google. I mean, that's at least the first step to knowledge. If you're embarrassed to go to a mosque or a group of people who are different, start with you and get the information. It will never be a wise thing to do, to learn about Christianity by going to anti-Christian website. I'm not going to learn about Judaism by going to a KKK website. Right? Go and see what they say about themselves from their own authentic sources. And by the way, learning about a group doesn't mean you have to become that group or fully accept it, especially when we're talking about theology. You can still remain a devout Christian and not accept the other theology, but you can respect and see the commonalities and see the goodness in what they have and appreciate it. The other thing is, I would say, once you've learned, educate others. Who among us is now on social media? How many of you are on Facebook, Twitter, email? All of us are on something, right? Use that tool to educate others. Share good stories. Because if you want them to change their perceptions about who the black people are, because media is focusing on black people equal criminals, show them how ridiculous that is by showing them the great examples of black people at every level of society, from the teachers to the nurses to the doctors. Same thing with Muslims, any community. I don't want to pick on one group in specific. So educate others using the tools that we have. The next level is learn or engage with that community. Because nothing changes and breaks down stereotypes than meeting with that community. Get to know. Chances are you already know someone. I think everybody said that. Chances are one of your doctors, one of your nurses, one of your co-workers is from those communities that you don't know. Maybe because they're not obvious, maybe they're not announced. Not everyone is brave enough to wear a turban, right? Some people, and I know people who have hidden their faith, hidden their identity because they're afraid of the reaction. And last but not least, hold others accountable publicly. And specifically, I'm talking about elected officials, because they're the ones who have the most influence. Because we might not have the ability to influence Bill O'Reilly or Sean Hannity, but we have the ability to influence our city council members, our mayors, our members of Congress. So when they think that they can exploit fear and ignorance in our communities to gain or improve their political standing, if we can prove them otherwise, then they will think twice. So they might not change their internal views, but we can condition their behavior. Because it took, by the way, in America, it took many generations to end racism. Racist views continued among many, but at least racist behavior stopped because it became illegal, it became unpopular, it became shameful, and so on. And that eventually leads, hopefully, to changing of views.
I think it is important for leadership to call people to be the best that we can be, the call to be fully human. And then I think within the faith traditions, it is to go beyond the call to be fully human and to enter into the divine. We have a prayer that's a mixing of water and wine, and it's administered this water and wine we come to share the divinity of Christ, who humbled himself to share our humanity. And it's part of that call for us to be our fullest human beings, but then it's a call to enter into the divinity that has created us. And so the definition of who God is becomes important. God is the God of all creation. This coming Sunday, within our faith tradition, we celebrate Divina Misericordia, the Divine Mercy. And as we focus on the Divine Mercy for this week, as I talk to my brothers and sisters in Espanol, it's an opportunity to be able to just cross over one more time as another community that speaks about God the most merciful, and to be able to make the connection that our God is the God the most merciful. And that's not just the definition of who God is, that's who we're called to be. And then how to apply that in a concrete way in our everyday lives.
Father Ed, I'm going to ask a follow-up question to what you just said. I'm wondering, in this day and time, when a phrase like political correctness was diminished quite a bit and mocked for several years on the campaign trail, and people started acting out and saying things that they would not have ever said before. I'm wondering, in this day and time, has the church lost any of its voice or any of its influence? The church, the mosque, the temple, because of the absurdity of things that are said and the positive reaction to it.
There was a reference to institutions overall having lost trust by people, and so that I think that's applied across the board, particularly because we are human beings and our failures are now put up in front of other people, and that's used to be able to diminish the authority of those institutions that have been important for the common good. And so the discussion for the common good and virtues such as prudence become important for us to be able to speak to what needs to be part of our discussions.
Do we have more questions here? Yes. Here we go.
Yes, I want to thank you all. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I was born in Iran. I'm a Muslim. And my wife is Christian. We got married 27 years ago. And one thing I really, is just my observation. I have traveled almost 54 different countries. I've lived in London for 8 years, lived in France for 9 years, and I've been here 27 years. And I'm so fortunate that my wife is an American, and the reason for that was because I wanted to learn about American culture, learning about also Christianity. But in my opinion, in my observation, I think the most important things in life, the fear and everything, it starts with the parents having love and giving love to their children. That's a number one, that there's no discussion about it, it's just really love. I made this documentary called BAM 6.6, and the reason I share this story of BAM 6.6 because it's a remarkable story of a young American Jewish couple going to Iran, and they were trapped in the earthquake. When I came here, I saw a movie called Not Without My Daughter. Many of you may have heard of that movie. Seen the movie. Sally Field, right, thank you, ma'am. It really hurt me. It really hurt me so much, and I said, gosh, this is not what I was raised. I was raised with love and compassion of my people. So I was looking for a possibility of making a documentary. And this story happened. That the American tourist, one of the ladies, Jewish, were trapped in Iran. I went after this story. Nobody wanted to give me any money because by nature I'm in the life insurance sales. Nobody wanted to give me money. But because I believe in faith and I prayed so much, I had to mortgage my home to make this documentary. And I did it. But this film is really truly non-political. It's just all about love and compassion of the Iranian people, how they treated this American couple. But my question to you is, if this film was negative, it would have been all over the media. Nobody wanted to pick up this film because it was from Iran. So what I'm asking you folks, I would like to give you a copy of this film to all of you. And if you like it, spread the message.
Okay.
Education is important, as all of you said, but the most important part of education is film and documentary. I hope you see this kind of film.
Thank you. Are there some more questions? Right here, this gentleman right here. If you would go give her. Oh, I'm sorry.
Right here.
I'm sorry. Right here, thank you.
So my question is on, what are some suggestions you have to overcome, as you mentioned, the fragmentation of our communities, right? So I know, the Sikh community is a very small community. We have very limited resources. So for our community to try to educate 300 plus Americans and to have them understand who we are, it's a very daunting challenge. And matter of fact, when an incident of, some Sikh guy in Fresno or Seattle who gets shot, we're washing his car in the driveway. I have noticed that the community tends to want to just, go back to, or, come together among other Sikhs. So there's a reaction that you want to, be around your own kind because that makes you feel safe. But then it falls into the same catch-22 is that we are further isolating ourselves into our own groups. So what are some suggestions, actions that we all should be taking that gets us to engage each other or puts us into each other? Because, for example, if I'm discussing what's happening in the Sikh community at work, you know what, we don't talk religion and politics at work, right? Or if I'm fearful that, hey, I want to have my kids be in a safe place in school and I want to go make a presentation on Sikhism, on Sikhism, the reluctance is, well, we don't discuss religion in the public school. And we found creative ways of still overcoming that. But what are, you think,
Do you have a particular panel?
yeah,
you'd like
to a panel, like, what are some concrete things that we should all be engaging from different communities that helps us, stay connected as Americans and not get fragmented further?
It's important for us in our Sunday liturgy to take a moment in prayer and offer our own needs and the needs of the church. To be able to have a specific incident that's happened that's significant, that we could be able to pray for a specific community that is hurting would be an important thing for us to continue to do. We do that sometimes when there's major events and we refer to it, but I think that in our own Sunday prayer, it is important to incorporate, especially most hurting communities, especially with the ones we're talking about.
Someone else?
It's interesting about the issue of religion and politics, because this is something that I discuss often at work. I came in as a 25-year-old, 21 years. And the thing that I found most striking when I came to the United States was growing up in a democracy in India, we would sit over cups of tea till 4 o'clock in the morning and be discussing fervently our opinions about faith and about politics, and still be very good friends. And we learned from each other. And I think that is what I find it's the political statement I'm making in some ways, almost removing myself from, detaching myself from the American that I am, and that I found it fascinating, and I continue to find it fascinating, how we have made it forbidden, verboten, to discuss those. And as a result of that, we are failing to learn from each other. And we are becoming increasingly more tribal, and we are much more comfortable with an opinion that we're already holding. We go to the media that we are most comfortable with, we get a newspaper that we are most comfortable with, and we're becoming cloistered in our own prejudices more and more, and reinforcing them further. I think to combat that, those of us who are here have to start having those conversations. And we, without a doubt, there's nobody, I agree with you, none of us have any intention of converting anyone to any other faith, like some pointed out. But we can do a lot by learning from each other and recognizing the commonality that we have in all those faiths. Most of those faiths were trying to create models by which we could remove ourselves from tribalism to becoming better global citizens. And it's tragic that in the end, all those faiths are again failing to do that. And that's not the failure of the philosophy of the faith, it's how we basically hijack the faith as humans to our own purpose. And that can only be combated by having open conversations with each other. Education is still ultimately the only way we can combat that. And that education can only be by us all being best representative of ourselves. I can't change anybody else, but I have to be the best representative of my community, of my profession, of my family. And if I am successful in doing so, then I would have been at least enjoying others to behave similarly. It's hard to hit somebody who's not entirely obnoxious. So, and not that I would tend not to be obnoxious. On occasions I'm a surgeon and can be quite assertive at certain points in time. But my effort has to be to at least force myself to be the best person I can be. And that's what faith is also joining us to do. It's a path. So it's a long journey. This journey has been going on for 4,000 or 5,000 years. I don't think we can change it overnight. I do want to point out, though, that yes, there are many failures in the United States. And prejudice has always existed here. But I can guarantee you, prejudice exists in equal amounts in every country, in every culture. Equal amounts. The difference lies in how institutions or countries or societies temper that prejudice. And that's where the battle of laws, and that's where the battle of leadership was another. Picking the right leaders is again our responsibility. Democracy is our responsibility. If this were a monarchy, we may not have any control. But if we don't go out and vote, and then we pick the wrong person, we have nobody to blame but ourselves.
Okay. The gentleman right here on the third row, please.
Can I quickly comment?
Oh, I'm
Is that okay? Just quickly, because I want to give practical maybe answer to that also, at least from my limited experience. I would say there's strength in numbers. And that is within the community, the inter-community, and with inter-communities, meaning we're only strong as, or as strong as our organizations and institutions. So we need to strengthen the institutions. When each one of us is strong within our own organizations, we allow those organizations to build alliances. Because I can tell you, as a member of somebody involved with care, we work very closely with the C Coalition, with SALDEF, for example. We work very closely with various Jewish human rights organizations, various interfaith groups, various NAACP, and so on and so forth. But they're as strong as their members allow them to be. So that is first. Become involved with something. Choose what is your area of focus. You might, maybe you care about the environment, so join that group, empower. You care about animal rights, join that. You care about the rights of the C community members, join that. So that is one. And then the other thing is, work on our organizations to build coalitions that allow us to build bridges, because then we can help educate people, whether it's the interfaith groups such as this one that hosted us today, whether it's the Abrahamic Faith Peace Initiative, whether it's Steve is here. So whether it's whatever group that allows us to transcend from us to building bridges with others, I think we can see that difference. And to build on the very well said comments to America, because I know we've talked about fear and bigotry and racism. I want to be sure that we don't leave thinking that this is the image of America. Unfortunately, it's the ugliness that gets the attention. Let's just look at what has happened in response to the ugliness. One of the biggest protests and marches in the history of our country was the Women's March on Inauguration Day. where millions and millions of women and people who supported them stood by them to speak up for the rights of all people in America, including Muslims, including immigrants, including the undocumented. Millions in 700 cities across the world, basically, including hundreds within the US. Look at what happened on the same day President Trump signed the executive order of the Muslim ban. What happened on that day? Tens of thousands of people, average Americans, mostly not Muslim, and I specify that, marched into what? Into the airports. Dozens of airports in our country. What were their demands? Releasing detained Muslim travelers, basically, Muslim travelers. None of them knew them. Nobody knew anyone who detained travelers. And their chant was, basically, no hate, no fear, Muslims are welcome here, or immigrants are welcome here. This is something that is very unique to our country, because we're pluralistic, we're diverse, people appreciate that. Unfortunately, the ugliness gets the attention, and it should get attention, but it should not blind us from the fact that most people are actually good. Most people are looking for a way to express that goodness. Sometimes they don't know. So by organizing with them and organizing with the others, we're providing opportunities and a platform for people to hopefully push the envelope of goodness.
Thank you. Now, sir, thank you for your patience.
I guess this question is primarily for Dr. Leonard. Something I haven't heard much of, and yet we hear a lot about it at the elections, and I've been doing some reading about it as it has an impact on hate crimes, and that is the country is undergoing a demographic change which it has never seen before. The long-standing majorities are losing their majorities, and with loss of majority, there comes a severe loss of privilege. It causes people to look backwards and say how great it was in the good old days, without saying that's when we had our privilege. But this is a force that we have to deal with when we're talking about the politics, or when we're here talking about hate crimes. So whether it's a cause or a contributing factor, what have you seen in your research, and for anybody else in the panel, what have they seen in their careers about this?
That's a great question. Let me make sure I have a mic that works. So about my son, he's the technical efficient. He's a technical aficionado. Is this one working?
It all work.
Oh, closer.
There we go. Very interesting. Here's some of the trends that we found out with respect to research. Let's go back about 90 years ago. The Klan hit zenith, and what had happened during that time? We had several independent and interdependent factors. We had the largest group of immigrants come to the United States. We just came out of a world war. We were shifting from an agrarian, rural, small town economy into a more industrialized urban economy. And we had the advent of the automobile, radio, jazz era decadence, and the African American exodus from the South to spread throughout the country. We have a lot of that going on now. We are primed. Now, here's the thing. Correlation is not necessarily causation. And again, the data isn't always as diagnostic and predictive as we'd like it to be. Our research is indicating that California, again, will exceed the national average for an increase in hate crime for 2016. Look for our report. It'll come out probably within the next week or so. What happened to California in 2014? We became a plurality Latino state. In Orange County, we're about 32%, 34% Latino, for instance. So when we know that demographic change is taking place, whether it's people who are Spanish and have darker skin, or folks who wear turbans, we have to have our educational, communal, and faith communities be prepared for that, and make sure that we address that. Some of the things that we found, for instance, with regard to hate crime, is when neighborhoods change, that is when we see a lot of tension. Interestingly enough, Not all prejudices are the same, and they're not all manifested the same way. So for instance, anti-Semitism remains the largest faith-type hate crime in the United States, but it's generally more targeted against communal institutions or people who are dressed very conservatively, religiously. So we know that as people become more out there and their numbers appear to get to a certain level, whether it's in some kind of national way or even within a community. One thing I think is very important, and I'm going to try and close on this because this is important. I'm looking at hate crime data from about 25 cities throughout the United States. We do FOIA requests, some places won't send us stuff, some places will. We have basically 9 out of the top 10 largest cities. Each community has its own localized conditions. It could be some tensions that are going on in the school. It could be a serial offender. It could be all these kinds of things. But a friend of mine who founded the Boston, he didn't found the Boston hate crime, but he was there early on. He found when the first families moved into a neighborhood or moved into a housing project, there was a spike. And then there was a quiescent period until it looked like whoever it was taking over. So when we know that we're experiencing certain demographic shifts, we should make sure our educational institutions, our faith communities, and our civic institutions play a role in it. So for instance, what have we been doing? We've been going around the country filming people and getting Sikh folks to say, hey, this is our faith. We went up to San Francisco, got a trial attorney from Muslim Advocate, and we're putting it on our website. It has to be done as a composite. No one entity can do it alone. A college can't do it, but all together. And one thing that I would do, here's something you can do. Tuesday, go to the Board of Supervisors and say, why are you trying to defund human relations in Orange County when we are the largest county in the United States that is even considering such a thing? So using the institutions that previously held us together, reinvigorating them are very important. With regard to demographic change, a big deal. In and of itself, demographic change doesn't necessarily result in hate crime. But what we've seen is in various communities, as they change, that's when we see a spike. One quick thing that I think you'll find interesting. Listen to this. This is very interesting from a research standpoint. We looked at the polling that came out in the various states, and we looked at Democrat, Republican, all this kind of stuff. Even in states like South Carolina, where 74% of Republican voters said they favored Muslim bans with respect to the primary, the minority of voters were against deportation with regard to Latinos, for instance. So prejudice manifests itself in different ways, and you have to make sure that you're addressing that, because the kind of prejudice that we see against, for instance, Muslims is much more of a fear-based prejudice, whereas with respect to Latinos, it's a cultural and economic and power-based prejudice. We're in charge here. Interestingly enough, when I went to this Klan rally, which was very well publicized, because unfortunately I was the only schnook who stood in to save the Klan guy, I was there to do research, and I looked at the signs that they were taking out. And you know what I thought was so striking? The signs that they took out were mainstreamed types of issues. Stop Sharia law and stop white cultural genocide. And to a certain extent, we're seeing that being mainstreamed. So not only are we talking about demographic change, and in California, for instance, the rest of the country, we did not see, at least FBI reported, an increase in anti-Latino hate crimes. But we did see it in California, and it wasn't all at the foot of President Trump. Communities in LA County, people of color were battling each other. In LA County, the overwhelming majority of racial hate crimes are by and between people of color. Oftentimes we're fighting over turf. So what we have to do is understand that all kinds of change irrespective of who the person might be, can invoke this fear, and we have to have institutions and answers to respond to it. Because sometimes the demographic change is not displacing, for instance, Anglos. It's displacing people of color between each other. And we have to have these institutions set up, whether it's hate crime units or human relations commissions or Interfaith, God bless you for doing this great work. But maintaining these types of responsive communities, whether it's in academia, the business community, interfaith, and that way we have an anchor to respond. But this demographic change is not going to stop.
Let me ask a follow-up question to that. Who is the next target?
It depends on where you are. In New York City, for instance, in 2017, we've seen a doubling of hate crime. And we are seeing an increase in hate crimes against Jews. And I think part of that is because in our society, we went after the easily identifiable folks, the transgendered folks. That was and by the way, it's still going to continue, unfortunately. But now, here's what we're looking at. Anti-elitism, anti-globalism, anti-this, anti-that. Now, it looks like Jews were the choice. But guess what? Los Angeles, where we have strong interfaith work, and also, as far as demography, they're not as densely concentrated in one area, whether it's Muslims or Jews. Well, there are obviously pockets, but on the East Coast, where it's much more densely populated, that's where we're seeing folks get hit. So what I have to say, whenever I wrote these things, well, what's the national trend? I say it doesn't matter. Look at the radar, the weather radar on your community. Because what we see is neighborhood conflicts, school conflicts, move-in violence, or serial offenders influencing the manifestations of hate throughout the United States. But really quickly, depending on where you are, we've been seeing quite a bit of anti-Semitic, but it's not everywhere. LA was down. Anti-Muslim, LA was down. But you know what we've been seeing around the country? The stuff that might not be the most obvious, but the stuff that's like grating on people. So for instance, what I mean is the cultural change, like, why are these Jews so visible? Or why are these gays so visible? Well, we've been seeing in a lot of major cities, anti-gay. So what happens is, it goes like this. So in 1 year, we'll see one particular community targeted kind of nationally, and then it'll manifest itself in different ways locally. But what I've been afraid of, that we would see, and it's interesting, because you would have thought with this election, there have been a lot of attacks against gays throughout the United States.
Thank you. We have another, here. Thank you.
Danny, to follow up on that one question real quickly, if I'm not mistaken, we're at about the pace for twice the number of murders of gays, transgenders in Orange County this year, right? Right now, almost as much as we had 2 years ago.
Right, so right now, like let's just kind of use trans youth as an example. And in case you don't know, the Williams Institute released a report stating that there's about 20,000 transgender individuals living here in Orange County alone. 20,000 of us. But right now, trans youth suicide outnumbers all youth homicides. All youth. That's heterosexual youth, LGBT, Black, Asian, Latino, Caucasian. Our suicide numbers are outnumbering all homicide numbers right now.
And that, I would have to say, the suicide is a result of the feeling of insecurity, which I would say is at the root of all of the other hate crimes and all of the other stuff that's going on right now. So if I'm looking at what happened in Berkeley last week, where we had these massive numbers of white people on both sides with a knockdown, drag-out fight, and I look at the postings I get on Facebook where, 3 comments in, it's turning to name calling and screaming and this kind of stuff. What can we do to try and calm all of that down? What can we do personally to help calm down that, the level of, I'd say insecurity? Everybody feels insecure is my best way of expressing it.
And I thank you for this question. As an advocate for the trans community here in Orange County, I don't believe in fighting hate with hate at all. I don't believe in going into strong debates or arguments. And I think the best way to answer your question is to also answer the question the gentleman had behind you earlier on, how do we not run to our own community? How do we not run in our own solace? Because unfortunately, my kids get bullied all the time. Adults get bullied. Our LGBTQ seniors get bullied. Me, being out and visibly trans, I get bullied all the time. I get harassed by my physicians. I haven't even been able to receive prescriptions from my pharmacy for 3 weeks because I'm not a priority. Everyone else's medication is a priority, but mine isn't. So I haven't even had medication for 3 weeks. So how do you as allies help us? You know, and the biggest thing is be there for us. Last year, when the Pulse Massacre happened, we had a gathering at the center, and we saw so many people come, cultural backgrounds, different religious backgrounds, and hug us and tell us it was gonna be okay. When we come out, whether it's through sexual orientation or gender identity, we lose people. We lose our sense of community. I haven't talked to my own parents in 3 years because of who I am. People that I was raised with in the church, who were my spiritual leaders, turned their back on me because I'm transgender. No one stands up and fights behind me. But by you asking, how can we fight beside you? By saying that, by being there, means the most to us. By comforting us when we're attacked and massacred, means the most to us. By us gathering together as one community. I don't believe in, okay, well, we have the LGBT community over here, the Muslim community over here, the Catholic community. No, we are all one community. We're all intersectional. When one area hurts, we should all hurt. When one is celebrating with joy over a victory, we should all celebrate with joy in a victory. You know, like someone stated over here earlier, get involved in each other's communities. Let's become more intersectional. Let's become more of that melting pot. Let's blend together. You know, volunteer in each other's community. Get to know us. Get to know our stories. Stand up for us. Educate people. Talk to people. Find out, why do you feel this way about this person? Why do you feel this way about this culture? Why do you feel this way about this community? Because you'll come to find out that there is really no basis except for fear of the unknown. And when you take away that unknown aspect and you educate them, this is who they are, and this is just how they live their life, and this is what they believe in, then they realize, well, that's not so scary after all. They're just like me, but just in a different type of way. Is every novel the same? No, because if every novel was the same, we would get bored, and we wouldn't want to read anymore. Same thing with us as individuals. We're not all the same, and it's okay to be different. So thank you.
One quick thing. Be careful of this, and those of you in the progressive community have to pay attention to this. One of the things that our report is going to show is that California has been a hotbed for something that doesn't get classified as a hate crime per se. But this is the political violence we talked about, for instance, in Berkeley. There are aspects of the hard left that say, these institutions don't work for us anymore. The elected officials aren't doing it, and people are being deported, and various communities are being discriminated against. So we are now going to opt out of the peaceful resolutions that take place by embracing pluralistic civic democracies and go out and bust heads. I'm going to tell you what to watch out for here in California because we're a blue state. We are going to see more street battles like we've seen in Costa Mesa, Huntington Beach, and the one that I unfortunately had experienced in Anaheim. And I think what's very important is for the progressive community is to say, no, we are going to stick together, and we have faith in our abilities to work together and work within the system, even though the outcomes might not always be to our liking. Because this is something that's very scary. We're seeing outbreaks of political street violence that we haven't seen in decades. And that's a kind of hate or internal conflict that we don't discuss because it's not part of the hate crime statute. Anyway, thank you for letting me address that.
Are there any other questions? Well, according to my watch, we can probably. Will you join me in thanking our extraordinary panel? Gentlemen, you have brought such a gift this evening with both your expertise and the experiences that you have shared with us. I also, if you will put your hands together one more time and join me in thanking the Orange County Interfaith Network for bringing such a wonderful. And a quick reminder, in just 12 short days, that would be May 2nd, it's a Tuesday, not a Thursday this time, we'll be having the final session of this series. The topic is going to be Demolishing Fear, Building Community. And it's going to be held at Chapman University at the Interfaith Center there. And I promise you, it will be just as an extraordinary panel there as well. If you will allow me just a final thought for the evening. When we started, I mentioned that the title of this program has us acknowledging that there are struggles, there are conflicts right here in our own backyard. We have heard some of them from our panel. Some of you have shared some of the things that are going on here. We don't always understand the differences in other people. Maybe it's not our place to understand totally, but to accept differences and not mock people, not destroy them because they're different from us. Maybe that's what we're chosen to do. And I hope that this evening's presentation has given us all new insights for new possibilities for alleviating the struggles that are out there, whether we've been through them personally or we know someone that goes through them. Looking for ways to alleviate those problems and instead to look for solutions, and sometimes resolutions may be what we're supposed to do. I think if we have the hearts and the minds to quell the struggles and to respectfully squash bitter and hurtful words and actions, well, we've got a positive and compassionate plan going for us. I have to tell you something that happened this morning. My husband always shares the LA crossword puzzle with me. He hands it to me while he reads the front page. And today, as he handed me the crossword puzzle, he said to me, "Hey, check out the horoscope." He said, "And read Sagittarius." Well, Sagittarius is his sign. So I thought, well, this must be something really special. You know, it was. This is what it said. What's unfair to one person is unfair to all. Standing up for another person's rights is standing up for your own. Now that sounds like a plan to me. More, it sounds like a version of the golden rule. May that be our guide. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.